The city of Babylon woke under a soft golden sunrise, its towering walls glowing like jewels in the early light. At the heart of this ancient metropolis, a young king stood before his advisors, his robes rich with deep blues and gold embroidery that caught the morning sun. This was Nebuchadnezzar II, tall, with a commanding presence, his thick, dark hair neatly tied at the back, and deep-set eyes that held a spark of fierce ambition and quiet wisdom. His strong jaw and regal bearing marked him as a man born to lead. Today, Nebuchadnezzar's voice filled the great hall, firm but filled with hope. Build for Babylon a palace the world has never seen. Let it be a testament to our empire's strength and glory, a beacon that will shine for generations. His royal advisors, draped in flowing tunics of white and purple, nodded with eager anticipation. They knew the king's vision was boundless. One advisor, an older man with streaks of silver in his beard, leaned forward. "Majesty, your words inspire all. We will summon the finest architects and craftsmen to realize your dream." As the assembly murmured their agreement, Nebuchadnezzar's gaze swept across the room. The air buzzed with the promise of creation. Outside the hall, laborers and artisans readied tools and materials, unaware yet of the grandeur about to unfold. In this moment, the young king's mind danced with images of towering pillars, shimmering gold, and lush gardens, visions that would become legendary. His heart beat with the steady rhythm of a ruler determined to carve his name into the annals of history. Deep within the sacred halls of Babylon's grand temple, the air shimmered with anticipation. Here King Nebuchadnezzar II watched as master artisans worked tirelessly to create statues of pure gold, symbols meant to embody the strength and divinity of his empire. Nebuchadnezzar himself was resplendent in regal attire, a flowing royal cloak of deep crimson, lined with gold thread, a finely woven linen tunic beneath, and a tall, bejeweled crown that sparkled with precious gems. His dark eyes gleamed with both pride and solemn reverence for the sacred task. Around him, priests, garbed in white linen robes, embroidered with azure and gold, intoned prayers softly, their voices weaving a serene rhythm that filled the vast chamber. Their faces were calm but focused, hands raised in blessing, as the artisans shaped gleaming statues of lions, bulls, and the great winged lions of Babylonian myth. One priest stepped forward and spoke in a voice both gentle and commanding. "May these golden images be vessels of divine protection, forever guarding our city and its king." Nebuchadnezzar nodded gravely. He knew these statues were more than mere art. They were declarations of power, spiritual shields against unseen threats. As molten gold poured into intricate molds, the room reflected a golden glow, bathing the king and his retinue in a celestial light. The artisans' faces were etched with concentration, their hands steady as they forged the destiny of Babylon. The king's gaze drifted to a statue nearly complete, a majestic lion poised in eternal vigilance. He saw in it the embodiment of his own rule, fierce, unyielding, and eternal. One night, Nebuchadnezzar II lay restless on his grand bed, the shadows of flickering torches dancing against the walls of his chamber. His mind was clouded with vivid, unsettling dreams, visions that seemed both mysterious and foreboding. The king, clad in a silk nightrobe embroidered with stars, awoke, troubled. His usually steady gaze was clouded by worry as he summoned his closest dream interpreters. The royal chamber filled with men draped in colorful robes, each bearing scrolls and ancient symbols. Nebuchadnezzar described the strange images that haunted his sleep. A towering statue made of gold, silver, bronze, iron, and clay. A great tree that stretched to the heavens only to be suddenly cut down. And strange beasts that roamed a desolate landscape. The interpreters listened intently, whispering among themselves as they exchanged concerned glances. One, an elderly man with a white beard and penetrating eyes, stepped forward cautiously. "Great king," he said, bowing deeply. "These visions speak of great change, an empire's rise and fall, power shifting like the sands of the desert. They warn of trials ahead, but also of hope beyond darkness." Nebuchadnezzar's brow furrowed deeply. The weight of the dream pressed heavily on his heart. Could the gods be sending him a message of doom or destiny? His mind raced as uncertainty crept in, shadowing the strength of the mighty ruler. He left the room quietly, his footsteps heavy, pondering the meaning of his dreams. In the silence of the palace, even the courtiers whispered nervously about what might come. As days passed, a shadow fell over Nebuchadnezzar's mind. His once steady and commanding presence gave way to moments of confusion and fear. The great king, ruler of Babylon's vast empire, now seemed caught in an invisible storm swirling within his thoughts. Nebuchadnezzar paced restlessly through the palace halls, his richly embroidered robes disheveled, hair tousled in wild strands. His eyes, once sharp and commanding, darted anxiously, as if searching for unseen threats. Whispers spread quickly among the courtiers and palace guards. "The king is not himself," one noble whispered to another. "The gods have visited madness upon him." Court officials huddled in secret meetings, their faces lined with worry. One minister voiced a trembling question: "How do we protect the kingdom when the mind of its king falters?" Nebuchadnezzar began muttering strange phrases and commands that confused even his most trusted advisors. He insisted on performing odd rituals, demanding the palace be cleansed with sacred smoke and ordering servants to prepare unusual meals at strange hours. Despite their fear, loyal guards and servants remained devoted, careful to shield the king from harm and public scandal. His closest advisors watched over him silently, hoping for a return to the man they once knew. The palace, once bustling with joyful ceremony, now echoed with tension and uncertainty. The mighty Nebuchadnezzar was caught in a battle unseen by most, a struggle within his own mind that would test his reign and legacy. Nebuchadnezzar, once the proud ruler of Babylon, had transformed. Now he wandered barefoot through the palace gardens, his majestic robes replaced by torn linen that hung loosely from his frame. His thick dark hair, once neatly tied, was now tangled and wild, framing a face marked by confusion and longing. His deep-set eyes roamed across the flowers and birds as if searching for comfort in their innocence. He spoke softly to the creatures, whispering words only they could understand. The palace guards followed at a cautious distance, their hands resting lightly on the hilts of their swords, torn between duty and compassion. "The king is lost," one murmured, "but still he is our king." Despite his madness, Nebuchadnezzar's regal bearing never completely faded. His every movement held a strange grace, a reminder of the man beneath the turmoil. The courtiers watched from behind high walls. Whispers filled the air. What fate has befallen our great monarch, they wondered, fearful yet fascinated by the king who had become both man and myth. In the midst of Babylon's growing uncertainty, a figure of calm emerged. Daniel, the wise prophet. Draped in simple yet dignified robes of deep blue and white, with a beard streaked by time, he approached the king's wandering form in the gardens. Daniel's eyes held gentle compassion as he spoke softly. "Great king, your mind is clouded, but this darkness will lift. The dreams you feared are a passage, not a prison." Nebuchadnezzar paused, meeting Daniel's steady gaze. There was a flicker of recognition, a fragile hope awakening within his troubled soul. Daniel continued, "The gods have sent these visions as warnings and guidance. Your strength will return. Your reign is not ended, but reassuring, renewed." The king nodded slowly, the weight of madness beginning to ease. Guards and courtiers watched silently, sensing the significance of this moment, a turning point in the king's fate. Though fragile, the king's eyes began to clear. The prophecy kindled light within him, a promise of healing and restoration. Gradually, Nebuchadnezzar's madness receded like a fading storm. His dark eyes regained their sharpness, and his bearing returned to the noble presence that had once commanded the empire. He stood before his courtiers in the grand hall once more, robes restored to their deep blue and gold splendor, crown gleaming with precious gems. His voice, steady and clear, resonated through the chamber. "I have been tested by the gods and by my own mind," he declared. "But I stand renewed, ready to lead Babylon to new heights." The courtiers erupted into relieved applause, some wiping away tears of joy. The palace, once shrouded in tension, now buzzed with celebration and hope. Nebuchadnezzar smiled faintly, the weight of his journey etched into the lines of his face. He knew the trials had changed him, deepened his wisdom, and strengthened his resolve. The empire's heart beat strongly once more, guided by a king who had faced darkness and emerged into light. With his mind restored and spirit renewed, Nebuchadnezzar embarked on one of his greatest projects, the creation of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Meant to be a breathtaking gift to his beloved queen, the gardens would defy nature and astonish the world. Nebuchadnezzar, regal in deep purple robes trimmed with gold, stood alongside his chief architect and head gardener. The architect, a man of sharp eyes and weathered hands, unrolled detailed scrolls filled with plans of tiered terraces and intricate irrigation systems. The gardener, young and passionate, spoke excitedly of exotic plants imported from distant lands. Cypress, palms, fragrant flowers, and fruit trees. The king's voice was filled with vision. "We will build a paradise in the sky where flowers bloom and rivers flow, a symbol of Babylon's eternal glory." Builders and laborers worked tirelessly beneath the hot sun, hauling stones and carving terraces into the palace walls. Water channels were constructed with precision, using advanced engineering to bring life to the elevated oasis. The promise of beauty and love intertwined in this living masterpiece, a testament to Nebuchadnezzar's enduring reign and devotion. Though restored, Nebuchadnezzar retained some unusual habits, particularly when it came to food. The royal kitchens buzzed with activity, cooks preparing exotic dishes to satisfy the king's unpredictable tastes. Nebuchadnezzar, now dressed in sumptuous robes of emerald green trimmed with gold, sat quietly in the dining chamber. His gaze was distant, but deliberate, as he sampled a platter of spiced lamb, rare figs, and honeyed dates. The head cook, a stout woman with flour-dusted hands and a keen eye, stood nearby, watching carefully. "Your Majesty prefers the lamb marinated in sumac today, with fresh pomegranate juice," she reported. The king nodded slowly, savoring each bite as if it held the key to his renewed vitality. Sometimes his appetite would shift suddenly, one day craving sweet fruits, the next desiring bitter herbs or strong wine. Courtiers whispered amusedly at these whims, but the cooks adapted swiftly, understanding that the king's palate was as complex as his mind. This peculiar attention to food was yet another chapter in the story of a ruler who had seen both madness and greatness. In the quiet of the night, Nebuchadnezzar sat alone in a softly lit chamber, the weight of his journey settling upon him. The flickering glow of oil lamps cast dancing shadows on the walls as he contemplated the fragile nature of power. His royal robes folded neatly beside him, the king's face was etched with lines of both strength and sorrow. He traced the carved designs of his throne thoughtfully and spoke aloud to his closest advisors, who had remained steadfast through his trials. "Power is a strange gift," Nebuchadnezzar said softly. "It can build great empires or destroy the mind that wields it. Madness and glory are two sides of the same coin." One advisor, a wise elder with graying hair, nodded solemnly. "Your Majesty, your strength in facing these shadows has made you a ruler not just of land, but of wisdom." The king's gaze lifted, eyes clear and steady. "May Babylon endure beyond me, and may those who follow learn that even the greatest must walk humbly." As the night deepened, a calm settled over the chamber, a moment of peace earned through hardship and hope. The mighty Nebuchadnezzar, once lost to madness, now ruled with tempered grace. Far away in Bavaria, a young king named Ludwig II sat alone in his grand chamber, surrounded by velvet curtains and flickering candlelight. His pale face bore the delicate features of a dreamer, soft blue eyes wide with wonder, chestnut curls falling gently over his forehead. Ludwig's slender frame was draped in silken robes embroidered with silver thread, and his fingers nervously toyed with a delicate music box. From an early age he was captivated by fairy tales and music, particularly the operas of Richard Wagner. This king's dreams were not of conquest or politics, but of castles floating among the clouds and stories where heroes triumphed in beauty and love. As he gazed out the window, Ludwig imagined a world transformed by art and fantasy. His ministers often worried about his withdrawal from state affairs, but Ludwig's heart beat to a different rhythm, a rhythm of imagination and escape. Ludwig's passion for castles was unmatched. His dreams took shape in stone and mortar as he commissioned the construction of Neuschwanstein, a fantastical castle perched on a Bavarian hilltop. Clad in a richly embroidered robe of royal blue, Ludwig stood with his chief architect, an older man with silver hair and a weathered face. Together they studied blueprints filled with turrets, balconies, and winding staircases. The king's eyes shone with childlike excitement. "This castle will be a refuge, a palace of dreams where reality fades and fantasy reigns." The architect nodded, trying to balance Ludwig's soaring vision with the limits of engineering. Workers chiseled stone below, their hammering echoing through the valley. Despite his obsession, Ludwig remained distant from court politics, his mind far away amid towers and fairy tales. At night, Ludwig's chambers echoed with the stirring music of Richard Wagner's operas. The king's pale face would soften as he listened to the tales of gods, heroes, and magical realms. Wearing a loose velvet robe, Ludwig often held letters from Wagner close to his chest. imagining conversations that bridged art and destiny. His closest servants watched quietly, unsure how to bridge the gap between the king's dream world and reality. Some whispered of the mystical power Wagner held over Ludwig's heart and mind. Ludwig's devotion to the composer became legendary, shaping the very soul of his reign. Ludwig's nights were filled with rituals that puzzled and concerned his court. Draped in a shimmering silver robe, he would roam his castles under the moonlight, poetry and tracing patterns in the air. His attendants followed silently, respecting his solitude yet growing uneasy, some that the king believed himself a character in a fairy tale, destined to live between worlds. In hidden chambers, Ludwig's obsessions deepened. Mirrors, candles, and ancient texts filled rooms like secret altars to his fantasies. Despite the strangeness, his devotion to beauty and art never wavered, casting a spell of mystery over his reign. Behind heavy wooden doors, Ludwig's secretive castle projects unfolded in silence. Architects and workers labored under strict secrecy, constructing hidden passageways and fantastical chambers filled with art and invention. Ludwig visited often, excited, eyes alight with wonder, as he inspected every detail. Paintings of heroes, mechanical devices, and gardens blooming inside stone walls. Courtiers speculated about the king's intentions, whispering tales of a man lost in dreams and a kingdom shaped by fantasy. Though isolated, Ludwig's vision was unwavering, a fairy tale brought to life, crafted with equal parts passion and mystery. As Ludwig's obsession with fantasy and seclusion deepened, murmurs of concern grew louder within the palace walls. Ministers and nobles gathered in shadowed chambers, their faces drawn with worry. A stern-faced minister, dressed in dark velvet with a chain of office, spoke urgently. "The king neglects his duties. His withdrawal threatens the stability of the realm." Another noble nodded gravely. "His visions may cloud his judgment, risking our people's welfare." Despite their fears, many remained loyal, hoping Ludwig's passion would wane, and he would return to his responsibilities. Meanwhile, Ludwig remained blissfully absorbed in his dreams, unaware of the mounting tensions outside. In secret chambers, hidden deep within the castle, Ludwig met with his beloved composer, Richard Wagner. Draped in rich robes, Ludwig listened intently as Wagner spoke passionately about music, myth, and destiny. Their friendship transcended politics, rooted in shared dreams of transforming the world through art. Wagner's fiery eyes met Ludwig's soft gaze as they plotted the future of music and culture, unaware of the growing skepticism outside their secluded world. These meetings were a refuge for the king, a place where imagination flourished beyond court intrigue. As months passed, Ludwig's isolation deepened. He withdrew further into his castles, avoiding court functions and public appearances. His servants grew accustomed to long silences broken only by the soft notes of a piano or the rustling of silk robes in empty halls. Courtiers speculated wildly. Some whispered of madness, others of divine inspiration. Yet no one dared confront the king directly. In his private chambers, Ludwig wandered amidst murals and statues, lost in a world of fantasy where he ruled over kingdoms of his own making. Rumors began to ripple through the palace. Some whispered that Ludwig was a mad king, lost to his fantasies. Others said he was a visionary, misunderstood by those bound to reality. In the bustling hallways, courtiers exchanged sly glances and hushed conversations. A young noblewoman smirked while recounting a tale of Ludwig speaking to shadows in the moonlight. Despite the gossip, many feared voicing concerns openly, for the king's favor was as unpredictable as his moods. The tension between admiration and unease grew, weaving a complex web of intrigue and mystery. As night draped the castles in velvet darkness, Ludwig lay awake in his grand bedchamber. The silence was filled with haunting melodies from his piano, echoing through empty halls. Alone but for his thoughts, the king dreamed of distant worlds, of knights, fair maidens, and enchanted forests. His pale hands rested lightly on the embroidered quilt, fingers twitching as if grasping at something beyond reach. Though surrounded by opulence, Ludwig's heart ached with solitude, a dreamer caught between reality and fantasy. And so, beneath the silent stars, the king's restless spirit wandered, seeking a place where dreams and life might finally unite. The city of Rome was alive with anticipation as the young Gaius Julius Caesar Augustus Germanicus, better known as Caligula, ascended to the imperial throne. A man in his mid-20s, Caligula bore the legacy of the Julio-Claudian dynasty. His short-cropped dark hair and piercing eyes gave him a commanding presence, but beneath the surface lay a volatile spirit. Clad in a deep crimson toga edged with gold, Caligula appeared before the Senate and the people, promising prosperity and justice. His smile was wide and confident, yet a flicker of unpredictability danced in his eyes. The senators, dressed in their traditional white togas, watched carefully. Some whispered hopes, others fears, aware that Rome stood on the brink of great change. Caligula's courtiers stood close, eager to gain favor with the new emperor, their faces a mix of admiration and caution. As the sun blazed overhead, Caligula's voice rang out across the forum. "I am your emperor, your guardian, and your master. Together, we will usher in a new era of glory for Rome." One of the most infamous tales of Caligula's reign began in the lavish gardens of his palace. The emperor, known for his unpredictable behavior, took an extraordinary step that would forever mark his legacy. Caligula, dressed in an elaborate purple robe embroidered with gold and wearing a crown adorned with jewels, stood proudly beside his prized horse Incitatus. The horse was no ordinary steed. His coat gleamed like polished ivory, his mane perfectly groomed, and his eyes bright and intelligent. Surrounded by a crowd of curious courtiers, senators, and servants, Caligula announced, "My horse, Incitatus, shall be consul of Rome. He deserves honor equal to any senator." Gasps and shocked murmurs rippled through the crowd. Senators in their white togas exchanged bewildered glances, some suppressing laughter, others visibly outraged. The courtiers, ever eager to please, bowed their heads, unsure whether to laugh or flee. Incitatus stood calmly, unaware of the chaos his new title caused. The emperor continued, insisting on the horse's luxurious accommodations, ivory stalls, purple blankets, and a marble manger. While some historians debate the story's truth, it reflects the extravagant eccentricity and bold audacity that defined Caligula's reign. Caligula's reign was marked by grand celebrations that blurred the lines between extravagance and excess. In the opulent palace gardens, the emperor hosted nightly parties that dazzled and disturbed the Roman elite. Draped in a shimmering robe of embroidered silk, Caligula moved among his guests with infectious energy. His sharp eyes sparkled with mischief as musicians played lively tunes and dancers twirled in colorful costumes. The guests wore their finest togas and jewelry, sipping wine from golden goblets as servants hurried by with platters of exotic foods, peacock tongues, roasted dormice, and sweet pastries dripping with honey. But the parties carried an edge of unpredictability. Caligula's laughter rang out as he ordered outrageous performances. Gladiators dancing with jesters, nobles forced to sing embarrassing songs, and elaborate theatrical displays that sometimes ended in chaos. Some guests exchanged nervous glances, unsure whether to be amused or alarmed. Yet the emperor's charisma kept the crowd enthralled, caught in the spell of his volatile charm. The nights were long, wild, and unforgettable, a reflection of a ruler both magnificent and mad. Behind the glittering parties and flamboyant displays, Caligula's reign was shadowed by sudden and unpredictable cruelty. His mood swung like a tempest, leaving those around him fearful and uncertain. In the grand hall, the emperor's face twisted in anger over a minor offense, an insult only he perceived. Wearing a deep red robe embroidered with gold serpents, Caligula's eyes flashed dangerously as he pointed a trembling finger at a trembling senator. "Your disrespect will not go unpunished," he hissed, voice echoing through the marble chamber. Guards seized the senator, who fell to his knees, pleading silently. The courtiers looked on in silent horror, some daring only to glance away. Yet moments later, Caligula could shift to charm and laughter, hosting an impromptu feast with the same men he threatened moments before. His unpredictable nature kept the court in a constant state of tension, where loyalty mingled uneasily with fear. Caligula's reign was filled with moments that bewildered his court and the people of Rome alike. Among his most infamous acts were his strange declarations and prophetic pronouncements that seemed to come from a mind untethered from reality. Clad in a richly decorated purple and gold robe, Caligula stood atop the marble steps of the palace, addressing a crowd of senators, soldiers, and citizens. His voice carried both authority and an eerie intensity. "I am a god among men," he proclaimed. "The moon bends to my will, and the sea parts before my command." Listeners exchanged uneasy glances. Some bowed their heads in fearful reverence, others whispered disbelief and concern. In his private chambers, Caligula spoke to oracles and seers, demanding visions of the future and assurances of his divine power. His obsession with the supernatural deepened, blending prophecy with paranoia. The emperor's declarations blurred the line between madness and majesty, leaving his court trapped between loyalty and dread. Caligula's fascination with the celestial was both poetic and unsettling. Under the silver glow of the full moon, the emperor would often be found alone on his palace balcony, eyes fixed upward as if seeking answers among the stars. Clad in a flowing white robe embroidered with silver threads, Caligula's pale face was bathed in moonlight. His dark eyes shimmered with a mixture of reverence and madness. "Look how the moon watches over us," he murmured to his closest confidants, who watched with a mixture of awe and concern. The emperor believed the moon was a divine force linked to his own fate, its phases guiding his decisions and moods. At times he ordered rituals to honor the moon, calling priests to chant hymns beneath its light. These strange nocturnal ceremonies added to the mystique of Caligula's reign and deepened the gulf between the emperor and his subjects. Caligula's extravagant vision extended beyond earthly palaces. He dreamed of floating palaces on the calm waters of Lake Nemi. These grand ships, lavishly decorated, were meant to be both pleasure vessels and symbols of imperial grandeur. The emperor, dressed in gleaming golden armor, stood on the shore beside his chief engineer, a meticulous man with graying hair and a furrowed brow. Blueprints and sketches of the massive vessels were spread before them. Excited, "These ships will be floating palaces," Caligula declared, his eyes alight with excitement, "fit for a god." Workers labored day and night, carving ornate wooden panels and gilding every surface. Masts soared into the sky, and gardens bloomed on deck. The floating palaces embodied Caligula's blend of extravagance and madness, a testament to his unyielding desire to surpass all earthly limits. Caligula's relationships with Rome's senators and gods were as volatile as the emperor himself. In the grand halls of the palace, tension simmered beneath the surface. Caligula, clad in a richly embroidered red and gold toga, paced impatiently before a group of senators dressed in traditional white togas. His sharp gaze flickered with suspicion as he questioned their loyalty. "You dare question my decisions?" he snapped, voice echoing through the marble chamber. The senators bowed cautiously, some swallowing nervously. A few exchanged furtive glances, unsure whether to show defiance or submission. Meanwhile, the Praetorian Guard, clad in gleaming bronze armor and leather, stood ever watchful. Loyal, yet wary, they guarded the emperor with strict discipline but whispered of his unpredictable wrath. Behind the scenes, alliances shifted constantly, with courtiers attempting to appease both the emperor's favor and the senator's authority. In this precarious balance of power, every glance and word could change the fate of Rome's rulers. Rome's streets buzzed with gossip and fear as news of Emperor Caligula's erratic behavior spread. Citizens gathered in marketplaces and forums, whispering tales that blended fact and rumor. A market vendor, his face weathered and lined, shook his head as he told a small crowd, "The emperor once ordered the moon to halt its journey. Madness has taken him." Women clutched their children, while soldiers exchanged uneasy glances. Some viewed Caligula as a living god, others as a dangerous tyrant lost to madness. Meanwhile, senators debated quietly in their chambers, concerned for the empire's stability. Despite the emperor's unpredictable whims, the city pulsed with life. Hope mingled uneasily with anxiety under Rome's golden sun. The reign of Caligula, marked by splendor and madness, came to a sudden and violent end. One fateful day, within the shadowed halls of the palace, a group of conspirators gathered with a dark purpose. Caligula, clad in his signature crimson toga, strode through the corridors, unaware of the danger closing in. His sharp eyes briefly flickered with suspicion, but his guard was down. The conspirators, led by Cassius Caera, a stoic and determined officer, waited patiently. Their faces were grim, hardened by years of fear and frustration. As Caligula approached, the plot was set into motion. In a swift, chaotic moment, the emperor was struck down by a flurry of blades. The palace erupted into turmoil. Guards clashed with assassins. Courtiers fled in panic, and the city of Rome was shaken to its core. In the aftermath, silence fell over the empire. Caligula's death marked the end of a turbulent era and the beginning of uncertainty. Historians would forever debate the line between genius and madness, and the legacy of the emperor who dared to defy the gods themselves. In the grand halls of the French palace, young Charles VI was crowned king amidst glittering gold and solemn vows. Barely in his teens, he stood tall, with a fragile but determined expression, clad in royal blue robes trimmed with gold. His dark hair was neatly combed, and his eyes shone with youthful hope as he took the crown from the archbishop's hands. Nobles dressed in rich velvets and silks filled the chamber, their faces a mix of admiration and expectation. Though the throne was his by birthright, the weight of responsibility pressed heavily upon him. Advisors whispered counsel, while courtiers watched eagerly to see how the young king would navigate the turbulent waters of power. The Kingdom of France awaited the dawn of a new era, one that would soon be shadowed by uncertainty. Not long into his reign, whispers began to spread about the young king's strange behavior. Charles VI, once full of promise and vigor, began to experience terrifying bouts of confusion and disorientation. One cold winter morning, Charles was found wandering the palace grounds, naked and shivering, oblivious to the biting frost. His once bright eyes were clouded, and he seemed unable to recognize even his closest advisors. The courtiers and guards were alarmed, rushing to cover him with cloaks and usher him indoors. The queen watched helplessly, fear etched across her face. Doctors and priests were summoned to diagnose and cure the mysterious ailment, but their treatments brought little relief. Court gossip swirled, some attributing the king's condition to divine punishment, others to a fragile mind overwhelmed by power. Charles's episodes would become more frequent and severe, casting a dark shadow over the kingdom and the hopes of his people. On one of the coldest nights of winter, Charles VI's madness manifested in a striking and alarming way. The king, in a trance-like state, stripped from his royal garments and wandered naked into the palace gardens blanketed with fresh snow. His pale skin gleamed under the moonlight, contrasting sharply with the icy ground beneath his feet. His dark hair hung loosely, tangled by the cold wind, and his eyes were glazed but distant. Servants scrambled to find him, their breath visible in the freezing air. The queen's cry echoed through the halls as she learned of her husband's perilous state. Guards hurried to surround the king, wrapping him in heavy cloaks to stave off the frostbite that threatened his fragile body. His steps were slow, cautious, as if feeling the cold burn through his flesh. This chilling episode became a grim symbol of the king's torment, a ruler stripped of power and dignity, vulnerable beneath a harsh winter sky. Charles VI's episodes of madness grew deeper and more bewildering. At times, he wandered the palace halls dressed in strange costumes or rags, speaking incoherently or claiming to be made of glass, fragile and shattering with every step. One afternoon, the king stood by a tall window, staring blankly at the bustling streets below. His dark hair was tousled, and his blue eyes glazed with confusion. "Touch me not, for I am glass," he muttered softly, stepping carefully as if fearing to break. His closest attendants, dressed in muted robes, exchanged worried glances, but dared not challenge him. They moved gently, guiding him away from danger. The court grew divided between sympathy and fear. Some whispered that the king was cursed, others prayed fervently for his recovery. This fragile monarch, once full of hope, was now lost within the labyrinth of his own mind. As Charles VI's episodes of madness became more frequent and severe, the royal court found itself in a constant struggle to protect the king and the kingdom. Courtiers, advisors, and guards worked tirelessly behind the scenes to shield their ruler from harm and to maintain the fragile balance of power. In the dimly lit council chamber, advisors in rich robes gathered, their faces etched with worry. They debated strategies to keep the king safe without revealing his condition to the public and foreign envoys. "His madness must remain a secret," whispered one advisor, "lest our enemies use it against us." Meanwhile, devoted guards patrolled the palace corridors, eyes sharp for any threat. They ensured Charles was never left alone during his episodes, guiding him gently through his confusion. The queen, draped in elegant gowns of deep blue and silver, sat quietly in her chambers, her hands clasped tightly as she prayed for her husband's recovery and for the strength to bear the burden of a troubled king. Through whispered plans and silent vigilance, the court labored to keep the kingdom intact, even as the king's mind wavered. The king's mind clouded by madness, Charles VI's advisors found themselves caught in a dangerous game of power. In the grand council chambers, noble families vied for influence, each eager to shape the kingdom's future. The chamber buzzed with hushed but heated debates. A middle-aged nobleman in a richly embroidered crimson cloak argued passionately, his voice low but firm. "We must act decisively to protect the realm from chaos." Opposing him, a silver-haired elder in dark robes cautioned restraint. "The king is still our sovereign. Let us serve him faithfully, even in his affliction." Outside the chambers, palace guards remained vigilant, aware that political rivalries might erupt into open conflict. The queen's role grew ever more crucial as she tried to balance the ambitions of the nobles while caring for her fragile husband. In this web of intrigue, loyalty was tested, and the fate of France hung in delicate balance. Amidst the turmoil of Charles VI's reign, Queen Isabeau stood as a pillar of strength and compassion. Draped in gowns of deep sapphire and silver, her presence was both regal and tender. Despite the mounting pressures from nobles and advisors, the queen's heart remained devoted to her troubled husband. She often visited his chambers quietly, offering comfort and calm in the face of his terrifying episodes. One evening, as soft candlelight flickered, Isabeau held Charles's trembling hand. Her voice was gentle but resolute. "My love, you are not alone. We will face this darkness together." The king's pale eyes met hers, a flicker of recognition and gratitude shining through the fog of madness. Outside the palace, rumors swirled, but the queen's loyalty never wavered. Her strength was a quiet force sustaining the fragile kingdom. As Charles VI's mental health waned, Queen Isabeau's role in the kingdom grew increasingly vital and complex. Beyond her duties as consort, she became a political force, navigating the treacherous waters of court intrigue and noble rivalries. Dressed in elegant gowns of deep emerald and gold, Isabeau presided over secret meetings with influential nobles and advisors. Her expression was calm and calculating, eyes sharp beneath a delicate veil. She negotiated alliances, brokered deals, and sought to maintain stability amid chaos. Yet whispers circulated, some accusing her of ambition, others praising her loyalty and strength. In a candlelit chamber, Isabeau addressed her closest council. "Our king's condition demands wisdom and unity. We must act not for power, but for the realm's survival. Her words carried weight, but her path was fraught with suspicion and challenge.
Beyond the palace walls, the people of France grew uneasy, as rumors of King Charles VI's strange behavior spread through the villages and towns. Markets, once bustling with lively chatter, now hummed with whispers of fear and uncertainty. In a small village square, a group of farmers and merchants gathered around a traveling storyteller. His voice lowered as he recounted tales of the Mad King, describing the monarch's bizarre actions and frightening episodes. "A king who forgets himself," he said, "is a danger to us all." Women clutched their children tightly, and men exchanged worried looks. The kingdom's future felt fragile, caught between hope and despair. Despite the fear, some remained loyal, praying for the king's health and the return of peace. The people's unease echoed across the land, a quiet storm gathering beyond the palace gates. As Charles VI's episodes of madness continued, France found itself on the brink of chaos. The fragile unity that held the kingdom together began to fracture, with nobles vying for control and foreign powers watching closely. The royal court was a hive of whispered plots and uneasy alliances. In grand halls adorned with tapestries and heraldic banners, nobles clad in richly embroidered robes exchanged guarded words. One powerful duke, his face stern and eyes cold, conferred secretly with emissaries from neighboring kingdoms, discussing strategies that could alter the fate of France. Meanwhile, common folk grew restless, unsure whether their king would return or if the realm would fall into civil war. Queen Isabeau stood firm amid the storm, her expression resolute as she navigated the dangerous tides of power and loyalty. The kingdom's future hung precariously in the balance, shadowed by madness and ambition. Born in 1530, Ivan IV of Russia, later known as Ivan the Terrible, came into a world of political chaos and intrigue. As a young prince, Ivan's childhood was marked by tragedy and turbulence. His father died when Ivan was just 3, leaving him orphaned and vulnerable in the cutthroat environment of the Russian court. Ivan's pale face was often solemn, framed by wild, reddish hair and piercing blue eyes that seemed far older than his years. Dressed in simple, princely garments, he was raised amidst palace intrigues and constant threats. His early years were filled with harsh lessons in power and survival. Tutors and guards watched him closely, shaping the future czar amid a swirling storm of ambition and betrayal. Despite his youth, Ivan's fierce intelligence and determination hinted at the complex and troubled ruler he would become. Ivan's early years were shadowed by fear and loss. After the death of his father, the young prince faced neglect and cruelty from those who sought to control him. His mother's death, when he was just 8, left him truly alone in a palace rife with betrayal. Ivan's face, once innocent, became hardened. His pale skin often bore bruises from the rough hands of his caretakers. His fiery red hair was tangled, and his blue eyes held a deep sadness mixed with fierce determination. He was forced to learn quickly how to navigate the dangers of court life. Tutors tried to teach him language and history, but survival lessons came from bitter experience, guarding himself against poison, deception, and violence. Those close to him whispered of a child growing cold, a boy who would become a ruthless man shaped by his painful youth. Even as a boy, Ivan showed flashes of a ruthless spirit beneath his fragile exterior.
Those who crossed him often found swift and harsh consequences. One afternoon, in the palace courtyard, young Ivan confronted a servant who had insulted him. His pale face flushed with anger, and his sharp blue eyes narrowed dangerously. Dressed in a simple tunic, Ivan's small fists clenched tightly as he advanced toward the offender. The servant, a burly man in coarse clothing, sneered and mocked the prince's youth. But Ivan's warning was cold and unmistakable. "Respect the blood of a czar," Ivan hissed, voice low but steady. The man recoiled, understanding the boy's fierce resolve. Stories began to circulate about the prince's unforgiving nature, a child already learning that power demanded fear and obedience. In 1547, Ivan was crowned the first Tsar of all Russia, a title that reflected his ambition to unite and strengthen the fragmented nation. The grand ceremony was held in the Kremlin's magnificent cathedral, with golden icons and rich tapestries decorating the sacred space. Ivan, now a young man with fiery red hair and piercing blue eyes, wore an ornate robe of crimson and gold, his face set with determination and pride. The ornate crown, heavy with jewels, was placed upon his head by the archbishop, amid solemn prayers. Nobles, priests, and commoners alike witnessed the momentous occasion, some with hope, others with apprehension. The title Tsar carried with it the promise of supreme power and the heavy burden of ruling a vast, divided land. Ivan's gaze swept across the crowd, fierce and unyielding, ready to shape Russia's destiny with iron will. Determined to consolidate his power and crush dissent, Ivan IV established the Oprichnina, a feared secret police force tasked with rooting out traitors and rebels within his kingdom. The Oprichniki were ruthless, dressed in black robes and mounted on black horses, striking fear into the hearts of nobles and commoners alike. Ivan, clad in a dark velvet robe embroidered with silver, met with his Oprichniki commanders in a shadowed chamber within the Kremlin. His fiery red hair framed a face hardened by years of paranoia and absolute authority. "This land will know order," Ivan declared, voice cold and unwavering. "No one shall defy the Tsar." The commanders nodded grimly, their faces obscured by black hoods. The Oprichnina's reign of terror began, shaking the very foundations of Russia's nobility and spreading dread throughout the realm. One of the darkest moments in Ivan IV's reign was the brutal massacre in the city of Novgorod. Suspecting treason and disloyalty, Ivan's Oprichnina descended upon the city with merciless force. Ivan, cloaked in a heavy black, fur-lined robe, watched grimly from a high balcony as his secret police executed his orders. His piercing blue eyes were cold, and his face set in a mask of iron resolve. The streets below ran red as homes were burned, nobles executed, and innocent citizens caught in the deadly sweep. The once vibrant city fell silent under fear and devastation. Historians view this atrocity as a terrifying example of Ivan's ruthless determination to secure absolute power, a reign marked by violence and terror. Ivan IV was a man of contradictions. Known for his cruelty and paranoia, he was also capable of moments of deep piety and generosity. His fierce temper was tempered by periods of devotion to the Russian Orthodox Church, and he often sought solace in prayer and fasting. Dressed in simple monastic robes, Ivan knelt before the altar of a grand cathedral, his fiery hair softened by the flickering candlelight. His eyes were closed, his face a mask of solemn humility.
Nearby, monks chanted softly, their voices filling the vaulted ceilings with haunting hymns. Despite his brutal reign, Ivan's inner conflicts shaped a ruler both feared and complex, a man wrestling with power, faith, and madness.
Ivan's reign was punctuated by sudden, violent outbursts that struck fear even in his closest advisors. Known for his fiery temper, the Tsar could erupt with terrifying force over perceived slights of betrayals. In a grand hall lined with ornate tapestries, Ivan, clad in a richly embroidered crimson robe, slammed his fist on a marble table. His red hair was wild, eyes blazing with fury. "Traitors! I will cleanse this land of all who oppose me!" he shouted, voice booming. Courtiers cowered, exchanging fearful glances, unsure whether to speak or flee. His unpredictability made the court a place of tension, where loyalty was tested constantly by the volatile ruler's wrath. One of the most tragic moments in Ivan's life was the accidental death of his beloved son and heir Ivan Ivanovich. In a fit of rage, the Tsar struck his son during an argument, a blow that would haunt him forever. The young prince, dressed in princely robes of deep blue, lay lifeless on the cold floor, his eyes closed. Ivan's face contorted with grief and horror. His red hair fell forward as he knelt beside his son, tears streaming down his face. The court was stunned into silence, the tragedy casting a dark pall over the already tumultuous reign. This personal loss deepened Ivan's madness and cruelty, fueling the cycles of violence that defined his rule. Ivan IV's legacy is a complex tapestry woven with threads of terror and reform. Known as the Terrible, not merely for cruelty, but for his efforts to centralize power and modernize Russia. In the twilight of his life, Ivan sat in a grand chamber, dressed in dark robes adorned with intricate patterns. His fiery hair was streaked with gray, and his piercing eyes reflected both fatigue and resolve. He held council with his advisors, discussing laws and reforms aimed at strengthening the state. Though his reign was marked by violence, Ivan's vision helped lay the foundations for a unified Russian empire. Historians continue to debate his place in history, a ruler feared and reviled, yet undeniably transformative. Born into one of Hungary's most powerful noble families in 1560, Elizabeth Bathory was raised amidst wealth, privilege, and strict expectations. Her dark, curly hair framed a pale, aristocratic face, with piercing gray eyes that seemed to hold a secret intensity. Dressed in richly embroidered gowns of deep crimson and black velvet, young Elizabeth was trained in the arts of courtly etiquette, languages, and the management of vast estates. Her parents, stern and commanding, prepared her for a life of power and influence. Tutors taught her to read, write, and manage servants, while she observed the politics of the Hungarian nobility closely. Despite her aristocratic upbringing, whispers hinted at a restless spirit beneath her composed exterior. At the age of 15, Elizabeth was married to Ferenc Nadasdy, a wealthy and influential Hungarian nobleman. Together, they managed vast estates and commanded armies, solidifying Elizabeth's position as one of the most powerful women in the region. Wearing a luxurious gown of sapphire blue and silver embroidery, Elizabeth stood beside her husband at grand feasts and political gatherings. Her sharp mind and fierce ambition earned her respect and fear alike. Though outwardly composed, Elizabeth's private life was marked by mystery and growing darkness. She wielded power with a calculated grace, overseeing her lands with an iron will, and commanding loyalty from servants and soldiers. The imposing castle of Shete, perched atop a rocky hill in the Carpathian Mountains, became Elizabeth's home and domain. The castle's dark stone walls and towering turrets cast long shadows over the dense forests below. Elizabeth, dressed in a flowing, dark green velvet gown, walked the cold stone corridors with quiet authority. Servants scurried to attend her every command, while guards patrolled the ramparts. The castle was both a fortress and a palace, a place of power, mystery, and whispered secrets. Local villagers told tales of strange lights and sounds echoing through the night, fueling legends around the mysterious countess. As Elizabeth Bathory's power grew, so too did the whispers that surrounded her name. Villagers and servants spoke in hushed tones of strange disappearances and eerie happenings near the castle. Elizabeth, dressed in a deep purple velvet gown embroidered with silver, maintained her regal composure in public. Yet behind closed doors, secrets stirred. Servants exchanged nervous glances, some daring only to murmur about the Countess's nocturnal rituals and her fascination with youth beauty. Despite the fear, Elizabeth's influence remained unchallenged. Her presence commanded respect and a trace of unease, a queen of mystery in a land of shadows. Elizabeth's obsession with eternal youth and beauty grew into a consuming passion. Legends say she believed bathing in the blood of young girls would preserve her own youth and vitality. In the privacy of her chambers, Elizabeth, dressed in flowing crimson silk, studied ancient texts and consulted with mystical advisors. Her pale face was set with determination, eyes gleaming with a strange light. Servants brought her rare herbs and potions, while the Countess pondered new ways to stave off time's decay. Though rumors swirled and fear mounted, Elizabeth's relentless quest for youth became a defining dark chapter of her life. Darkness descended upon the lands surrounding Castle Shete, as rumors turned to terror. Tales of missing girls and eerie screams in the night spread like wildfire. Elizabeth's reputation transformed from a powerful noblewoman to a figure of fear, the so-called Blood Countess. Servants who once served her with loyalty grew silent and fearful, while villagers prayed for deliverance from the shadow that hung over their homes. Though many stories remain shrouded in mystery and myth, the chilling beginnings of Elizabeth's dark deeds forever stained history. As the years passed, stories of Elizabeth Bathory's dark deeds spread beyond the castle walls, stirring fear and fascination across the region. Rumors of blood rituals, vanished girls, and a sinister countess filled taverns and marketplaces. Elizabeth, now older, but still striking in her deep black gowns embroidered with red, maintained a chilling calm. Her piercing gray eyes seemed to burn with a cold intensity as she moved through her castle halls. Visitors and nobles whispered behind closed doors, some daring to speak openly of curses and witchcraft. Yet none dared challenge her openly, for her power was still immense. The legend of the Blood Countess grew, entwining fact with myth and casting a long shadow over her name. Whispers turned into formal accusations as local officials and clergy began investigating the rumors surrounding Elizabeth Bathory. The Hungarian king ordered a commission to examine the allegations, sending knights and clerics to the castle. Elizabeth, draped in dark robes, faced the inquiry with cold defiance. Guards barred entry to many, while the countess herself maintained a composed yet icy demeanor. The investigators searched the castle, uncovering chilling evidence, hidden rooms, torture devices, and the remains of young victims. The walls of Castle Secca bore silent witness to horrors that shocked even the most hardened officials.
The evidence was overwhelming, and Elizabeth Bathory faced trial before the king's court. Dressed in a somber black gown, she appeared before judges and nobles who condemned her crimes. Though she denied much, witnesses testified to horrifying acts, sealing her fate. The verdict was imprisonment for life, and Elizabeth was confined to a small chamber in her own castle, walled in, isolated from the world she once ruled. Her legacy became a cautionary tale, a dark legend, whispered through the ages. Elizabeth spent her final years imprisoned within the cold walls of Castle Secca, confined to a small dark chamber. The once powerful countess, now a shadow of her former self, faced solitude and reflection. Dressed in simple gray robes, her pale face was marked by age and sorrow. Her piercing eyes, once fierce, had softened to a distant gaze. Few visited, and her legacy became a blend of horror and myth. When she died in 1614, the legend of the Blood Countess was sealed in history, her story a chilling reminder of power's dark and dangerous edge. In the waning days of the Russian Empire, a mysterious figure named Grigory Rasputin arrived in St. Petersburg. Born a peasant from Siberia, his piercing blue eyes and long dark hair set him apart from the elite. Dressed in simple, worn peasant robes, Rasputin carried an aura of mysticism and magnetism. He spoke softly, but with conviction, captivating those he met with tales of faith and prophecy. Nobles and clergy alike were intrigued and unsettled by his presence. Some whispered of his healing powers, while others feared his growing influence over the imperial family. Rasputin's arrival marked the beginning of a turbulent chapter for Russia, one where faith, politics, and scandal intertwined. Rasputin's rise to prominence came through his alleged healing of the Tsarevich Alexei, heir to the Russian throne, afflicted with hemophilia. The young boy's life hung in delicate balance, and desperate parents sought any hope. Dressed in dark robes, Rasputin was brought to the royal palace. His intense gaze met the fearful eyes of the Tsarina Alexandra as he approached the boy's bedside. With quiet prayers and gentle touch, Rasputin seemed to ease the child's pain, calming the room. The Tsarina in flowing royal gowns watched with sad, tearful hope. Courtiers and doctors looked on with a mixture of awe and skepticism. This moment cemented Rasputin's influence, intertwining his fate with the fate of the Romanov family. Rasputin's influence at court grew quickly, much to the alarm of many nobles and officials. His mysterious aura and sway over the Tsarina made him a controversial figure. Dressed in dark robes, Rasputin attended court gatherings with an unsettling presence. He spoke bluntly and without deference, unsettling aristocrats used to rigid protocol. Behind ornate palace walls, whispered plots and schemes began to form. Nobles in rich velvets and furs debated how to curb Rasputin's power. The Tsarina defended him fiercely, trusting in his healing and spiritual guidance.
This tense atmosphere set the stage for conflicts that would shake the very foundations of the empire.
Rasputin's growing influence sparked waves of scandal and rumors throughout the Russian court and beyond. Tales of wild parties, inappropriate behavior, and mysterious power circulated like wildfire. Dressed in his dark flowing robes, Rasputin remained unfazed by the gossip. His piercing blue eyes held a knowing, almost hypnotic gaze. Courtiers and nobles whispered behind his back, casting wary glances and exchanging scandalous tales. Some accused him of witchcraft and manipulation, others of debauchery. Despite the swirling rumors, Rasputin's grip on the Tsarina remained unshaken, intensifying the court's division. Many nobles and officials grew desperate to curb Rasputin's growing power, fearing it threatened the empire itself. Secret meetings were held, plotting to undermine his influence over the royal family. In dimly lit chambers, men in dark robes and velvet sat in hushed discussion. A stern-faced nobleman laid out plans to expose Rasputin's secrets and diminish his standing. Yet Rasputin, aware of the growing hostility, remained a step ahead, navigating the court with cunning and unyielding confidence. The battle for control of the empire's future intensified behind the palace wall. Despite the growing opposition, Tsarina Alexandra's loyalty to Rasputin never wavered. She saw in him a spiritual guide and protector for her family, especially her fragile son Alexei. In the quiet solitude of the royal chambers, Alexandra dressed in elegant royal gowns, often meeting Rasputin privately. Their conversations were intense and private, filled with shared hopes and fears. Her faith in Rasputin's power was unwavering, even as the court's murmurs grew louder. Together, they forged a bond that would shape the fate of Russia's last imperial family. As Rasputin's influence deepened, fear and resentment festered within the highest ranks of the Russian court. Whispers of dark magic and manipulation circulated, breeding paranoia among nobles and officials. In opulent palace chambers adorned with gilded furniture and heavy curtains, noblemen in sumptuous velvet robes exchanged anxious glances and guarded words. Their eyes darted nervously as they plotted how to confront the growing threat Rasputin posed. Some courtiers trembled, torn between loyalty to the Tsarina and fear of the mysterious holy man's unpredictable power. The palace, once a symbol of imperial grandeur, now simmered with tension and uncertainty. The mounting fear and hatred culminated in plots to eliminate Rasputin. Several assassination attempts were made by nobles desperate to end his hold on the imperial family. One moonlit night, a group of conspirators, cloaked in dark garments, crept through the palace corridors, their faces set with grim determination. Armed with knives and pistols, they moved silently, seeking their target. Rasputin, ever vigilant, sensed the danger. In a dimly lit chamber, he faced his attackers with a mixture of calm and defiance. The ensuing struggle was chaotic and violent, echoing through the palace halls. Though wounded, Rasputin survived, further mystifying his followers and deepening the court's dread. Despite surviving attempts on his life, Rasputin's days grew numbered. His enemies became bolder, and the tides of revolution swept across Russia. In the quiet of a snowy night, Rasputin reflected on his life and fate. Dressed in simple dark robes, he sat alone by a frost-covered window, his piercing eyes distant and contemplative. Outside, the empire trembled, caught in the throes of change and upheaval. Rasputin's legacy would be forever entwined with the fall of the Romanovs and the end of Imperial Russia. The turmoil surrounding Rasputin foreshadowed the tragic end of the Romanov dynasty. Revolution engulfed Russia, and the imperial family's fate was sealed. In the Winter Palace, chaos reigned as soldiers and revolutionaries clashed in the streets below. The grand halls, once filled with royal splendor,
echoed with uncertainty and despair. Tsar Nicholas II and his family, dressed in simple clothing, faced their final days with a mixture of fear and resignation. The empire's centuries-old monarchy came to a violent close, ushering in a new era of upheaval and change.
Born in 1638, Louis XIV entered the world amidst the splendor and strife for the French monarchy. From a young age, he was destined for greatness. His pale face was framed by soft blonde curls, and his bright blue eyes sparkled with curiosity and ambition. Dressed in delicate infant garments, embroidered with gold thread, the young prince was the center of courtly attention. His mother, Anne of Austria, watched over him with tender devotion, while tutors and nobles prepared him for the responsibilities to come. The future Sun King's reign would become one of the most influential and extravagant in history, shaping France's destiny for centuries.
Louis XIV's childhood was carefully crafted to prepare him for the throne. Surrounded by tutors, musicians, and artists, the young prince absorbed lessons in languages, history, and etiquette. Clad in fine velvet and silk, Louis practiced reading and writing under the watchful eyes of his instructors. His bright gaze revealed an eager mind, hungry for knowledge. Courtiers often observed the boy's curious spirit and sharp wit, qualities that would later define his rule. The royal nursery was a world of refinement and discipline, shaping the future monarch's vision of power and glory.
During Louis XIV's youth, France was engulfed in the Fronde, violent civil wars that challenged royal authority. Nobles and parliamentarians rose against the crown, creating chaos that shaped the future king's views on power. Louis, though still a boy, witnessed the turmoil firsthand. Clad in simple but elegant clothes, he hid with his mother and advisors in fortified palaces, watching soldiers march and hearing the clash of swords. The young prince's eyes reflected both fear and determination, understanding that survival meant mastering control and authority. These early experiences left a lasting imprint, forging a monarch who would centralize power and command loyalty with unmatched force.
At the age of 23, Louis XIV was formally crowned King of France in the Grand Cathedral of Reims. Draped in a magnificent robe embroidered with gold fleur-de-lis, his blonde curls shimmered under the candlelight, and his bright blue eyes shone with determination. The archbishop placed the heavy golden crown upon his head as the nobles and clergy witnessed the historic moment with solemn respect. The grand hall was alive with the echoes of chants and the rustle of silken robes. This ceremony marked the beginning of an era of absolute monarchy, where Louis would rule not just with power, but with flair and majesty that earned him the title the Sun King. Louis XIV transformed a modest hunting lodge into the magnificent Palace of Versailles, a symbol of royal power and artistic grandeur. The palace's golden gates and sprawling gardens reflected the king's vision of absolute monarchy and control. Clad in elegant robes of royal blue and gold, Louis inspected the ongoing construction. Architects, gardeners, and artisans bustled about, their faces marked by devotion and pride. The palace became not just a residence, but the heart of French political life, where nobles were drawn into the king's orbit, their loyalty secured by luxury and spectacle. Versailles embodied Louis's desire to awe and dominate, a physical manifestation of the Sun King's brilliance. Life at the court of Louis XIV was a dazzling spectacle of ceremony, intrigue, and strict etiquette. Nobles competed for favor, dressed in elaborate costumes and jewels, while artists and musicians entertained the royal audience. Louis himself was the center of attention, moving gracefully in his resplendent robes, commanding respect and admiration. The halls of Versailles echoed with laughter, whispered plots, and the soft strains of harpsichords. This vibrant court life reflected the king's philosophy of absolute power, where every gesture was calculated and every alliance forged in the light of the Sun King's gaze. Louis XIV skillfully centralized power by drawing the nobility to Versailles, keeping them under his watchful eye. Through lavish entertainments, strict etiquette, and carefully orchestrated court rituals, he made the nobles dependent on royal favor. In the grand halls of Versailles, nobles dressed in rich velvets and silks competed for attention. Louis, radiant in a golden embroidered robe, presided over the court with a commanding presence. Every gesture, every bow was a calculated performance. The nobles knew that their status and influence depended on the king's approval. This intricate dance of power secured Louis's dominance over France's aristocracy for decades. Louis XIV's reign was marked by numerous wars aimed at expanding French territory and asserting dominance in Europe. With the powerful French army at his command, he pursued ambitions that reshaped the continent. In a military tent adorned with maps and banners, Louis, wearing a decorated military uniform, discussed strategies with his generals, stern men clad in armor and ornate coats. The king's sharp gaze scanned the maps as he plotted campaigns, determined to strengthen his kingdom's position. These wars brought both glory and hardship, testing France's resilience and the loyalty of its people. Beyond war and politics, Louis XIV was a great patron of the arts. His reign saw a flourishing of French culture. Music, theater, painting, and architecture reached new heights under his support. In a grand salon filled with ornate paintings and sculptures, Louis, dressed elegantly in court attire, listened attentively as artists and composers presented their works. Musicians played harpsichords, dancers rehearsed intricate steps, and painters unveiled their latest masterpieces. Louis's passion for the arts was part of his vision to make France the cultural capital of Europe, inspiring beauty and grandeur that echoed his royal authority. Louis XIV's reign lasted over 72 years, making him one of the longest reigning monarchs in history. His legacy is a blend of absolute power, cultural grandeur, and military ambition. In his final years, Louis sat quietly in his ornate study, dressed in a simple yet dignified robe. His once vibrant blonde curls were touched with gray, and his eyes reflected the weight of decades spent ruling. The Sun King transformed France, leaving behind a magnificent palace, a centralized government, and a cultural legacy that endured for centuries. Though not without flaws and controversy, Louis XIV's reign shaped the course of European history and remains a symbol of royal majesty. Born in 1729 as Sophie of Anhalt-Zerbst, Catherine's journey from a minor German princess to Empress of Russia was extraordinary. Sent to Russia to marry the heir, Peter III, she adapted quickly, learning Russian language and customs with determination. Dressed in simple but elegant gowns, young Sophie's pale face, framed by chestnut hair, reflected both curiosity and resolve. She studied the Russian Orthodox faith and immersed herself in court life. Her sharp mind and ambition soon became evident to the Russian nobility. Catherine was poised to reshape Russia's future. Catherine's marriage to Peter III was politically arranged but personally troubled. The young couple, dressed in royal robes, met under the watchful eyes of the Russian court. Peter, tall with blonde hair and a stern expression, was awkward and often cold. Catherine's warm smile masked her growing unease. Though outwardly a united front, tensions simmered beneath. Catherine quickly realized the need to secure her own position and power. Her resolve hardened with every passing day. Tensions culminated in a coup that would change Russia's course. Supported by military officers and nobles dissatisfied with Peter's rule, Catherine orchestrated a swift takeover. In a dimly lit chamber, Catherine met with conspirators dressed in military uniforms and elegant court attire. Her face was steely and determined. The palace buzzed with anticipation and fear as forces loyal to Catherine moved to seize power. Peter, caught off guard, was forced to abdicate. Catherine assumed the throne, heralding a new era. With Peter III deposed, Catherine assumed power as Empress of Russia. Her coronation was a grand affair, marked by splendor and the promise of reform. Dressed in a richly embroidered imperial robe and jeweled crown, Catherine's confident gaze swept across the assembled nobles and clergy. She firmly promised to modernize Russia, strengthen the empire, and improve the lives of her subjects. Her reign would be defined by Enlightenment ideals and ruthless political acumen. Catherine embraced the ideas of the Enlightenment, corresponding with philosophers like Voltaire and Diderot. She sought to modernize Russia's laws, education, and governance. In her private study, Catherine, dressed in elegant yet practical gowns, read volumes of philosophy and science. Advisors and scribes worked nearby, drafting reforms. Though she faced resistance, her vision for a stronger, enlightened Russia drove her reforms forward. Her efforts left an indelible mark on Russian history. Catherine the Great's reign was marked by vast territorial expansion. Through war, diplomacy, and strategic marriages, she extended Russia's borders deep into Europe and Asia. In a grand war room adorned with maps and battle plans, Catherine, dressed in a richly embroidered military-style gown, thoughtful, consulted with generals and diplomats. Her sharp eyes scanned the maps, plotting the future of the empire. Soldiers in ornate uniforms stood ready, while envoys from neighboring countries negotiated alliances and treaties. Catherine's vision of a powerful, enlightened Russia became a reality, but it came at the cost of conflict and upheaval. Her legacy is a testament to ambition, intellect, and the complexities of power. One of the most serious challenges to Catherine's rule was the Pugachev Rebellion, a massive peasant uprising led by the pretender Yemelyan Pugachev, who claimed to be the deceased Tsar Peter III. In the vast Russian countryside, peasants, armed with makeshift weapons, rallied under Pugachev's banner. Their faces showed desperation and fierce resolve. Catherine, informed of the rebellion, summoned her generals to a war council. Dressed in a dark military coat with silver embroidery, her expression was grave but determined. The rebellion threatened to destabilize the empire, forcing Catherine to act decisively to protect her reign and the Russian state. Determined to maintain order, Catherine deployed her armies to crush the Pugachev rebellion. Fierce battles erupted across the steppes as loyal troops clashed with peasant insurgents. In a fortified camp, Catherine, clad in a commanding military uniform adorned with medals, reviewed reports from her generals. Her face was resolute, eyes steely with determination. The rebellion's leader, Pugachev, fought with desperate valor but faced overwhelming odds. After months of brutal conflict, the uprising was suppressed, and Pugachev was captured and executed, restoring fragile peace to the empire. This victory reinforced Catherine's authority, but exposed the deep divisions within Russian society. After quelling the rebellion, Catherine focused on reforming the vast Russian Empire. Her goal was to modernize administration, law, and education, drawing inspiration from Enlightenment ideals. In her grand study, Catherine, dressed in a stately gown of deep blue and silver, reviewed reform proposals with trusted advisors and scholars. Books and scrolls filled the room, symbolizing knowledge and progress. She debated policies on serfdom, legal codes, and the promotion of arts and sciences. Though progress was slow and met with resistance, Catherine's vision shaped Russia's future and cemented her legacy as an enlightened despot. In her later years, Catherine the Great remained a formidable ruler. Though aging, her sharp mind and indomitable spirit shaped Russia until her death in 1796. Dressed in an elegant dark velvet gown trimmed with fur, her silver-streaked hair framed a face marked by wisdom and experience. She sat in a richly adorned chamber, surrounded by portraits of ancestors and shelves filled with books. Despite challenges and controversies, Catherine's reign left an indelible mark on Russia, expanding its borders, modernizing its institutions, and fostering culture. Her legacy is one of power, intellect, and the complex dance of enlightenment and autocracy. Elagabalus, Roman emperor from 218 to 222 AD, was infamous for his eccentric and scandalous behaviors. From an early age, he defied Roman norms with flamboyant rituals and wild parties. His reign shocked the Senate and people alike. Elagabalus, with his striking youth and delicate features, often dressed in exotic robes embroidered with gold and purple. His long dark hair framed a face that was both charismatic and unsettling. He introduced the worship of the Syrian sun god Elagabal to Rome, holding bizarre ceremonies involving lavish banquets with strange delicacies and peculiar entertainments. His unpredictable nature extended to his personal life. Stories tell of extravagant displays, odd marriages, and bold defiance of tradition. Though his reign was brief, Elagabalus remains a symbol of Rome's most bizarre and decadent emperors. Elagabalus was known not only for his religious eccentricities, but also for his unusual and controversial marriages. Defying Roman social norms, he married multiple times, including unions that scandalized the elite. One of his wives was a Vestal Virgin, a sacred priestess sworn to chastity, shocking Roman society to its core. Elagabalus's disregard for tradition caused outrage among senators and commoners alike. He was also rumored to have taken male lovers and openly challenged gender roles, further unsettling the Roman establishment. Dressed in resplendent robes with intricate gold embroidery, Elagabalus appeared unbothered by criticism, asserting his divine right to rule and love as he wished. His bizarre marital choices were part of a reign marked by excess and defiance. Elagabalus was famous for hosting extravagant banquets that pushed the boundaries of Roman luxury and bizarre excess. His feasts featured exotic dishes, unusual combinations, and theatrical displays designed to shock and awe. The emperor, clad in flowing purple robes embroidered with gold, sat atop a raised dais as servants presented trays of peacock tongues, camel heels, and other rare delicacies. The air was filled with the scent of exotic spices and incense. Guests were treated to strange entertainments, performers disguised as gods, musicians playing haunting melodies, and even animals released into the dining hall. Though some nobles marveled at the spectacle, others whispered of decadence and questioned the emperor's sanity. These banquets were emblematic of Elagabalus's reign, wild, unpredictable, and utterly unique. Elagabalus famously declared himself the earthly embodiment of the Syrian sun god, Elagabal. He introduced radical religious changes, attempting to replace Rome's traditional pantheon with the worship of his deity. Dressed in resplendent gold and solar-themed robes, Elagabalus led grand processions through Rome, carrying a sacred black stone symbolizing Elagabal. The emperor's ceremonies were elaborate and unfamiliar to many Romans, involving exotic music, dance, and rituals that bewildered and angered the populace. His claims of divinity challenged the established religious order and deepened the divide between the emperor and Rome's traditionalists. Elagabalus's divine pretensions contributed to his downfall, but left a lasting impression on the empire's history. Elagabalus's extravagant lifestyle and religious reforms sparked unrest among the Roman Senate and military. His disregard for tradition and the disdain of powerful factions eventually led to his downfall. Dressed in regal purple robes, Elagabalus faced the growing opposition with a mix of arrogance and desperation. His once radiant face showed signs of weariness. Senators and soldiers clad in traditional Roman armor and togas conspired against him. Whispered plots filled the marble corridors of the palace. In a dramatic turn, the Praetorian Guard declared Elagabalus deposed and executed. His reign of chaos and excess ended abruptly, leaving Rome to grapple with the consequences. Though Elagabalus's reign lasted only 4 years, his legacy as one of Rome's most bizarre and controversial emperors endures. His flamboyant lifestyle, radical religious reforms, and disregard for tradition shocked the empire. Writers and historians later portrayed him as a symbol of decadence and excess, a ruler who challenged societal norms and paid the ultimate price. Dressed in simple Roman attire, a historian or storyteller recounts Elagabalus's tale to an attentive audience, highlighting the lessons of power, ambition, and consequence. Elagabalus's story serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of excess and the complexity of history's colorful characters. King Ludwig II of Bavaria, known as the fairy tale king, ruled in the late 19th century and is famous for his obsession with fantasy, art, and grand castles. His reign was marked by eccentricities that set him apart from typical monarchs. Ludwig, a tall man with pale skin and wavy blonde hair, often appeared lost in thought, dressed in lavish military uniforms or romantic medieval costumes. He commissioned extravagant castles like Neuschwanstein, inspired by Wagnerian operas and fairy tales, spending vast sums of the kingdom's wealth on his dreams. Ludwig's withdrawal into his fantasy world alienated him from political affairs, leading to conflicts with his ministers and eventual deposition. King Ludwig II's passion for fantasy found its greatest expression in the castles he commissioned. Neuschwanstein, with its soaring towers and fairy tale spires, became a symbol of his dreamlike vision. Dressed in rich, medieval-inspired robes, Ludwig toured the ongoing construction, his eyes alight with wonder and imagination. Architects and craftsmen bustled around, carving intricate stonework and painting lavish frescoes. Though these castles enchanted many, they drained the royal treasury and deepened tensions with Ludwig's government. His castles stand today as monuments to imagination and eccentricity. King Ludwig II's deep immersion in his fantasy world led him to retreat from the political realities of Bavaria. Preferring art and architecture over governance, he isolated himself within his castles. Clad in richly embroidered robes, Ludwig spent long hours in his private chambers, surrounded by books, music scores, and paintings inspired by Wagner. Ministers and advisors, dressed formally, grew increasingly frustrated as Ludwig withdrew. Their attempts to engage him met with polite but firm refusal. His detachment weakened royal authority and fueled concerns among the political elite about the kingdom's future. King Ludwig II's life ended under mysterious circumstances in 1886. Found drowned in Lake Starnberg alongside his doctor, his death sparked speculation and conspiracy theories. In the twilight of his life, Ludwig appeared pale and fragile, dressed in a simple yet elegant robe. His eyes held a distant sadness, reflecting the burdens of his lonely reign. The kingdom mourned a ruler who lived in dreams, whose castles still wisp tales of fantasy and tragedy. Though questions linger, Ludwig's legacy endures in his magnificent palaces and the enduring allure of his enigmatic life.